It's Dynasty draft season. Let's rank those wide receivers. Tier 1, receiver number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. No surprise here. Everybody has him as their number 1 wide receiver. There's a reason he went 4th overall. And it's not just because his dad is Marvin Harrison. This guy's an absolute beast. 6'3", 209, didn't even show up at the combine because he's just that good. He knew he'd be the first receiver off the board. Dominated yards and touchdowns for his team. 14 touchdowns last year. Y'all know Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not going to belabor the point. Everybody knows he's a beast, and I love that he went to the Cardinals. He has Kyler Murray as his quarterback. That's the best quarterback for my tier 1 and tier 2 wide receiver. Kyler Murray can sling that thing, and now he has a brand new receiver. I think Marvin Harrison is going to be a dominant number 1. So if you got a first pick in a rookie dynasty draft, I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr., assuming it's not 2 quarterback. And even then, comes down to need. My second receiver in tier 1, Malik Nabers. This one, again, was easy. Drafted 6th overall to the New York Giants. Only downfall to that is Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback by any means. But the positive is his competition is nothing. He's going to be the clear-cut number 1, whereas in college, he had to split targets with Brian Robinson Jr. Well, now, I don't think Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt are going to be taking major target shares from him. He's set up to be the focal point of his offense. Fantastic pick in the first round. And for those of you concerned about Daniel Jones, there's a world where Daniel Jones isn't here next year. This is Dynasty. You want a talented player that is going to get the opportunities. That's Malik Nabers. That's what happens when you draft a receiver in the top 10 picks. This was 6th. They're going to use him a lot. This might surprise some people, but that's going to wrap up my tier 1 players. Moving on to tier 2. Roma Odunze shouldn't be in the same tier as Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. And here's why. Roma Odunze starts off my tier 2, drafted by the Chicago Bears. Bears. Drafted with his buddy Caleb Williams. They're going to be a nice tandem. So why did I put him in tier 2 instead of tier 1 like everybody else? Well, it's not necessarily the talent, because I do think that Roma Odunze is at least in the same class as Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. I do think that Harrison and Nabers are slightly better, but I'm also concerned with the opportunity that Roma Odunze is going to get. Roma Odunze is going to be competing with DJ Moore, who's a very good wide receiver, and Keenan Allen, another great wide receiver. Both of those are going to demand targets. Not to mention, he's going to have Caleb Williams throwing them the ball. That's 3 people to feed from a wide receiver on a franchise where they've never thrown for 4,000 yards. Now, I'm not saying he can't throw for 4,000 yards. I'm more concerned with the touchdowns than the yards. I think Caleb Williams is going to do fine, but is Roma Odunze going to eat if both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are healthy? Now, Keenan Allen has had some injuries in his past, and he's probably not going to be on the Bears after this year. But even then, if Keenan Allen is gone, DJ Moore's still going to be there. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers do not have competition. They are the clear-cut number 1 from Jump Street. Roma Odunze, in my opinion, at best, is the number 2 in 2025, assuming Keenan Allen leaves. And even then, if he takes over to be number 1, DJ Moore ain't gonna be far behind. So I had to put him below the other 2 who are the dominant ones on their team and will be for sure for the foreseeable future. That being said, I have no one else in tier 2. He is by himself because he's better than the other guys, but he's not as good as the first 2. Tier 3 starts with Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not only did Xavier Worthy run the fastest time in the 40 in combine history, but he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs with the best quarterback of our generation, and Andy Reid is the perfect coach for him. Andy Reid has had his experience with a quick receiver, Tyreek Hill, more aptly Deshaun Jackson. They're going to utilize this kid in plenty of different ways. It's going to get creative. Running a 4.12 will bring out that creativity. You can use him in a crazy amount of ways, and he's not just a speedster. He runs routes too, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I am a little concerned about his health. He may be fast, but he's also small. 5'11", 165. That's a small guy. We're talking about an NFL player. So that does concern me. Another thing that concerns me, he's not going to be the number one on this team for a while. As long as Travis Kelce's there, he's going to be the number one. After that, it gets a little murky. Rashee Rice is currently dealing with his legal issues. I expect him to miss some time, but this is Dynasty. Rashee Rice is still going to be on the team, most likely. He'll probably miss some games, but he did work last year, so he's going to be involved. They signed Marquise Brown on a one-year rental. I'm not really concerned about that one, mainly because there's a world where he's really not even here next year. And I'm not even going to bring up the other receivers. Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, they're irrelevant to me now. But the receivers I have after him on this list are going to come in and be clear-cut number one receivers. So why do I have him so high? Upside. The upside of a world where he is the number one receiver for Patrick Mahomes. That's the biggest upside you can have. I'll break it down further when tier 3 is complete. It'll make more sense. My next player in tier 3, Keon Coleman, signed with the Buffalo Bills. He should be the new number one wide receiver for Josh Allen. And anytime you can get in the same room with Josh Allen, your value's pretty high. And with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis gone, there's a big hole to fill. There's a lot of targets that just left. Well, here comes Keon Coleman to be that guy. And before you ask, no, I'm not concerned with Shakir or Curtis Samuel, although I actually really like Curtis Samuel. He's probably going to be on my sleeper list this year. But the coach basically came out and said, yeah, sometimes rookies sit, but we're not in that situation. He's going to come in and play the X. That sounds like opportunity. And at 6'4", 213, that's a big boy. He should be able to get some contested catches. He was 51% of his team's touchdowns last year. Now, it was only 11, but they're still over half. He doesn't seem to be the best separator, which could be a problem in the NFL, but when you're 6'4", you can get it done contested catch-wise. It's just going to be a little tougher in the NFL. He also gives hilarious interviews, so if you draft him, you're going to get some funny clips. My third receiver in tier 3, Lad McConkey, drafted by the LA Chargers. Lad didn't have crazy statistics in college or size-wise. He's 6 foot, 186 pounds, which isn't that big, but he is a precise route runner. And he's pretty quick. Tied for the 6th fastest time in the 40 this year. 4.39, that's good. My man's under 4.4. And did I mention he's about to have a lot of opportunity? Both Keenan Allen, a staple of the Chargers offense for forever, and Mike Williams, gone. I know that everybody says that the Chargers are gonna have to run the ball a lot, which they will, but they got to throw it to somebody. And you're telling me they drafted an early second-round receiver that's a precise route runner that's pretty fast? Yeah, I love me some Lad McConkey. He's going to be a fantastic fit. He did deal with a back injury in college, but we'll just have to monitor that. And I'm a big fan of being tied to Justin Herbert in a Dynasty league as the number one receiver. Yes, please. My last player in tier 3, Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence needed a new big body wide receiver, and they got one. Brian Thomas is a beast. 6'3", 209, and runs a 6.33? That's the second fastest time in the 40-yard dash this year for wide receivers. Wow. And just to be clear, Brian Thomas Jr. ran a 4.33 at 6'3", 209. Is Brian Thomas Jr.'s 40 time more impressive than Xavier Worthy's record-breaking time? Let's talk about it. Just to put that in perspective, Xavier Worthy ran the fastest time that's ever happened in the 40-yard dash. Brian Thomas Jr. is 0.12 seconds slower than him, and he weighs 44 more pounds. If you put 44 pounds on Xavier Worthy, is he only losing 0.12? Brian Thomas is an athletic beast. Do not undersell that. He is going to be blowing past people and then winning for the contested catches because he's big. He's a big dude. 6'3", 209, running a 4.33. I don't want to undersell that. That is fast. Second fastest time this year is wild. Now, whether or not Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be the number one, that's up in the air. The team did lose Calvin Ridley this offseason, but they gained Gabe Davis, who does similar things to Brian Thomas Jr., but he's just not as big. And the team still has Christian Kirk, but Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas Jr. do two completely different things, so I'm really not concerned about that. But regardless, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is a good pick. There's just some questions that I don't have for the other players that I have for him. Who should you pick in your rookie draft between Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, McConkey, and Brian Thomas Jr.? They're all going around the same spot, so you're gonna have to make this decision. It comes down to what you need on your team. If you need immediate production, Keon Coleman and McConkey are probably your guy. The other two, Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr., are going to have to fight to be the number one. Keon Coleman and McConkey don't have to do that. There is no one ahead of them that is going to be taking snaps over them. Immediately, day one, they are the number one wide receiver. So if you need immediate action from a wide receiver, those two are your guys. The one with the highest upside, which is why I have him ranked the highest, is Xavier Worthy. The why is simple. He's connected to Patrick Mahomes, and you could possibly have the number one target for Patrick Mahomes long term. Travis Kelce won't play forever. And when he leaves, there will be a new number one. It's going to be between Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, but there's a world where you have the number one option for Patrick Mahomes. And he's a speedster? Yes, please. Now, the safest is McConkey. He's a great route runner and the number one receiver for Justin Herbert. That's great. Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas are a little raw, but Brian Thomas is an incredible athlete. With his size and speed, he could be the best out of all four of these guys. I'm not betting on it, but there's a world where Brian Thomas Jr. becomes absolutely elite and a staple in that Jacksonville Jaguars offense, and he's gonna be going the latest. I haven't seen him drafted ahead of the other three all draft season. Last time I checked, he was a first round pick. Means he's gonna be with Trevor Lawrence at least 4 to 5 years. That's pretty good. So who to pick depends on what you are looking for out of this player. Immediate action, Keon Coleman or McConkey. Long-term upside, Xavier Worthy. The most freak athlete, Brian Thomas Jr. When you're 6'3", 209, and you run a 4.33, yes, you are a freak athlete. Don't get me wrong, Xavier Worthy is unbelievably fast, but he's also smaller than 6 foot and weighs 165 pounds. He's a tiny guy. Brian Thomas is huge and super fast. Don't sleep on Brian Thomas Jr. I wouldn't draft Brian Thomas Jr. ahead of the three ahead of him, mainly because it's more of a roll of the dice. But if he hits, oh, he's hitting. Moving on to tier 4. Xavier Legette, the newest wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. Why did I drop the first round pick into tier 4? Honestly, I don't like his quarterback, Bryce Young. I think that Bryce Young could be solid. I'm not writing the kid off at all. But if I had to pick between Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, or Bryce Young is at the bottom of that list, and he's got competition. Now, I don't really think the other receivers they have on the team can do what he does. I think he's unique in that. He's 6'1", 221, that's a big boy. He's like an upgraded Jonathan Mingo. They still got old man Adam Thielen there, but the team also traded for Deontay Johnson, meaning he's not going to be the centerpiece of this offense immediately. Now, I have heard some positive notes on him from the coach. Coach apparently loves him. The coach, Dan Canales, says he runs all the routes that they want him to run. That's great. He's also a big boy that can catch. The coach used to work with the Seattle Seahawks, so he compared him a little bit to DK Metcalf. That's a good sign. But he's going to have to fight for his targets in an offense that needs to be proven and a quarterback that I'm really not a big fan of. So you drop down a tier. Still good though. Also tied for the 6th fastest time in the 40 amongst wide receivers. 4.39, that's pretty good. Anything under 4.4, nice. My second receiver in tier 4, Ricky Pearsall, my last first round pick. Ricky Pearsall got famous from an incredible one-handed catch he made. That put him on everybody's radar. Even mine, and I don't even watch Gator games like that. Not a Gator fan. Sorry, Dad. He already knows. Back to Ricky Pearsall. He was a surprising first round pick for me, but I keep hearing good things about his route running, and he's got good hands, which is nice. And him joining this offense is a gift and a curse. The gift is Kyle Shanahan just makes it work. He is incredible at getting the ball in his players' hands in space and letting them do work. Love it. But the competition is undeniable. Competing with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle. That's 4 different elite pass catchers. Ricky Pearsall will be the 5th. Well, on a positive note, for him at least, I expect either Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel to be gone before the end of this year. So that'll open up some opportunity. But even if that happens, that's a lot of mouths to feed. Not that he can't be productive. Brandon Ayuk has been productive. Deebo Samuel has been productive. George Kittle has been productive at times, but it's It's not really his fault. He's just a great blocker. So offensively, he's not going to get utilized as much as he could be. He's no Travis Kelce. They just don't like to use him like that. And then, of course, Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the league. So Ricky Pearsall could be really good, but he's got a lot of obstacles. That's why he drops down into my tier 4. Next up, my wide receiver 3 in tier 4, Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. He's a big boy too, 6'2", 205. As you can see down here, he's the 3rd fastest wide receiver in this draft, running a 4.3 4.40. That's fast for a guy that's 6'2", 205. According to the head coach, he's a very good separator at the top of his routes, and he called him a competitor. I thought they were all competing, but it's nice coach speak for, I like this guy. So I think he's gonna slot in as the wide receiver 2 for the Indianapolis Colts. So the question is, why do I have him in tier 4? I love Anthony Richardson for fantasy football. I think that he's great. He's gonna run the ball, get touchdowns, but running quarterbacks don't rely on their receivers as much all the time like pocket passers do. And considering Adonai Mitchell probably won't be the number 1, he's going to be the number 2 behind Michael Pittman Jr., I think that the targets are going to be good, not great. And when they get in close, Anthony Richardson is probably going to run the ball because he's an elite runner. So I like Adonai Mitchell. I just don't think that he's going to get massive target volume. My 4th receiver in tier 4, Roman Wilson. I like Roman Wilson, but I love that draft spot. The Pittsburgh Steelers are notoriously amazing at drafting wide receivers, and I'm talking not in the 1st round. Their track record is incredible. I mean, Antonio Brown, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Juju Smith-Schuster back in the day, and now Roman Wilson. They find elite route runners that can catch the ball. And he's also kind of fast. Not super fast, but he's pretty fast. He's one of the 4 guys tied for the 6th fastest 40 time at 4.39. It's a little less impressive than Xavier Legette because Roman Wilson is not a big guy. He's actually kind of small. 5'11", 185. That's not a big guy. But just because he's small doesn't mean he's not efficient. And being a good route runner gets you open and helps you score touchdowns. That's why he scored 12 last year for Michigan. I think he's going to come in and be the wide receiver 2 pretty much off rip. Good grab. Moving on to my 5th receiver in tier 4, Jermaine Burton, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Jermaine Burton dropped in the actual NFL draft because of some off-the-field issues. I'm not getting into that. Just know he fell in the draft. If you want to know, look it up yourself. But I think this is a great landing spot for him. He has an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow that's going to be slinging him the rock. His future is a little up in the air depending on what's going to happen with the receivers ahead of him. At the moment, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both searching for a contract and not at OTAs. And on top of that, Tyler Boyd, the wide receiver 3, gone, no longer on the squad. And Joe Burrow has to throw it to somebody. So in the OTAs, Jermaine Burton is getting one-on-one work with Burrow. That's incredible because he normally wouldn't get this. Now, Jamar Chase not being in OTAs makes sense. He wants a new contract, and this is probably more so for show. It is optional. T. Higgins also wants a new contract, but they're probably going to get rid of T. Higgins, whether it's before the season or during the season. I don't see T. Higgins getting signed to the Cincinnati Bengals because he's going to make some money, but he's not going to make it there. So who's going to slide in? Jermaine Burton will be the wide receiver 2 for Joe Burrow. Love him as a sleeper. Just drafted him in one of my Dynasty teams. Super stoked. More about Burton in general. According to the head coach, he has great hands and no drops his last year in college, which is incredible. He creates separation and he's physical, which is very important when you're in the AFC North. Those boys are physical. I like Jermaine Burton. I'm going to be grabbing him in most of my leagues. Stay out of trouble, young blood. My last player in tier 4, Jalen Polk, wide receiver for the New England Patriots. He was drafted at the top of the 2nd round to be the number 1 receiver for Drake May. This team did also draft Javon Baker in the 4th. But as of right now, I think Jalen Polk will be the number 1 receiver, but it ain't guaranteed. I'm hearing he's a great route runner and he can run all the routes. I think that's solid, but we don't know who the starter's gonna be. Is it gonna be Jacoby Brissett? Is it gonna be Drake May? Regardless, I think Polk's gonna be involved and involved early. Moving on to tier 5. Troy Franklin. Troy actually slipped in this draft. He was projected to go in the 1st to 2nd, ended up going in the 4th to the Denver Broncos. That's actually kind of a positive considering he gets reunited with his quarterback, Bo Nix. Nice. Gotta love the quarterback wide receiver tandem. Gotta think that that leads to him getting more targets and getting more involved in the offense. And with Jerry Jeudy gone, I think he slides right into that wide receiver 2 role. Sorry, Marvin Mims. Looks like you're getting pushed to the side again. I will say this. I hope that he can stay healthy because he is skinny. He's tall, 6'2", but he's 176 pounds, which is a small guy. You might need to bulk up a little bit. Don't take too many big hits, bro. Moving on. My second receiver in tier 5, Devontez Walker. Wide receiver 4, the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are in need of a wide receiver 2. I keep hearing good things about Rashad Bateman, but I keep not seeing it on the field in regards to production. I love the landing spot because anytime you have Lamar Jackson throwing you the ball, you got an opportunity for big games. And this kid's pretty fast. He was the 4th fastest receiver in this draft. Gotta like that. He's a little light. 6'1", 193, but that's not too bad. You can bulk up a little bit and get to 200. But running a 4.36, gotta love that. I think he slides into being the wide receiver 2 for this team. Now, that's basically like being the wide receiver 3 because it goes Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, and then the rookie, Devontez Walker. Next up, Malachi Corley. That's misspelled. It's supposed to say Corley, not Worley. Drafted by the New York Jets. He had the 2nd most receptions out of everybody in his class at 101. Should slide into being the wide receiver 2 for this squad. Maybe wide receiver 3 whenever Mike Williams comes back to be healthy. But apparently he's a good route runner. Aaron Rodgers is going to like that. Don't know how that's going to translate to fantasy points, but yeah, apparently he's good after the catch, which is great for Aaron Rodgers. Next up, Javon Baker. Javon Baker was drafted in the 4th round to the New England Patriots as the 2nd wide receiver for them behind Jalen Polk. And no, I'm not just including him because he went to UCF. Go Knights! He's also just a good wide receiver. Right now, I have him slotted as the number 2 spot, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's fighting for that number 1 spot at some point. And even if he's not, he could still be a starter on the opposite side of Polk. Jalen Polk, Drake May, and Javon Baker have already been building a rapport. I'm really curious to watch to see what happens with this. His talents, he creates separation, and he's good after the catch. Gotta like that. Probably a sleeper in your draft. I'll briefly go over these last 2. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver for my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With Mike Evans getting older, it makes sense that we bring in some more receivers to try to bolster that receiving room. 6'1", almost 200 pounds. He's no Mike Evans, but there's not a lot of Mike Evans out there. Definitely not in the round he was drafted. Looking forward to see what the kid can do. And last but not least, Malik Washington, wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. Mike McDaniel was talking this kid up, basically saying he's going to get an opportunity to do work. I love to hear that. I don't know how much this kid could possibly be involved with Tyreek Hill demanding targets as well as newly paid Jalen Waddle. I'm not quite sure how many targets he's supposed to get, but if the coach Mike McDaniels likes him, I love it because he's going late. Probably grab him too. Sleeper. All right, let's review 2024 Dynasty Fantasy Wide Receiver Rankings by tiers. Let's get it started. Tier 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. Tier 2, Roma Odunze. Tier 3, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, and Brian Thomas Jr. Tier 4, Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Adonai Mitchell, Roman Wilson, Jermaine Burton, and Jalen Polk. Tier 5, Troy Franklin, Devontez Walker, Malachi Corley, Javon Baker, Jalen McMillan, and Malik Washington. Who did I have right? Who did I have wrong? Who was too high and who was way too low? Let me know down in the comments. Drafts are coming up. Gotta be ready. You gotta find out who you're gonna draft. If you want rankings on any of the other rookies as well as other dynasty rankings, don't worry. I got you. Click here to be prepared. See you in the next one. Peace.